So I know a lot of people are probably at the point where they're hitting exhaustion thinking about and talking about the recent murder of Charlie Kirk. But I wanted to take some time for myself to think and pray about it before offering like a hot take or an immediate reaction. I wanted to offer something a little bit more substantial if I did address it. Because I think we need to move from shock and anger, which is understandable and important, but then to something that will bring about some kind of good or consolation so that it isn't just a meaningless death. And there's a lot I want to say, but before I get to the main point of all of that, I did want to say something about Charlie specifically, which is that it bugs me that he's been characterized as much as he has as a polarizing and a controversial figure. Even though I don't agree with everything that he said, I still don't agree with that characterization. Even some people going as far as to say that he got what he deserved for his views, which are so extreme and intolerable. The first thing that I'd say to that is, who isn't controversial in this extremely polarized moment in history? Everyone who stands up for some kind of belief is going to be controversial today because something like half the country, if we're talking about the United States of America, is going to be on the other side of some particular issue. Every thought leader, every politician is controversial. And if they aren't, then it's probably because they aren't really doing or saying anything. But I've noticed that only conservative-leaning leaders get labeled controversial by the media coverage. Jordan Peterson is controversial. Anytime you see a headline about him, it's controversial figure Jordan Peterson. Groups like the Young Turks, they're radical. Ben Shapiro is controversial. AOC is daring and uncompromising. And likewise, people who support or align with the things that Charlie Kirk spoke about are made to feel like they're the minority. They're the ones needlessly stirring up controversy from the radical fringes. But the reality is, these are the more traditional and common views that are ubiquitous in most communities. I also find it glaring when people denounce the things that Charlie stood up for with such moral confidence as extreme and intolerable. But if that's true, if his views were so damnable and erroneous, shouldn't it have been easy to dismantle him in a debate? And yet, time and time again, he held his own. Even if you think he lost those debates, you have to admit that it was hardly a blowout for the other side. Like if two soccer teams meet each other in a game and the score is something like 3-2, you have to admit that the losing team was there to play and could hardly be dismissed as entirely derisory or deficient. They obviously had competence in their own game and they had every right to be there. And the same is true for Charlie Kirk, even if you think he was on the losing end of his many debates. For people to denounce him as if his views were wholly without merit, even though they couldn't demonstrate that on a debate stage, shows that their hyperbole is based more on insecurity than anything grounded in actual facts or being on the right side of an issue. What I saw was somebody who was consistently able to make a reasonable defense of his position. But if his beliefs were so contemptible, that shouldn't have been possible. And yes, that goes both ways, admittedly. Charlie didn't always blow his opponents out of the water either, even if you think he won, which is why we all need a little more humility and patience with people that we disagree with. And for his part, I think Charlie was a person who was trying to promote that kind of patience and sincere engagement with people that he disagreed with. He seemed dedicated to trying to draw people into conversation about issues that matter to them and to engage the youth in ways that, frankly, their schools and their colleges were failing to do so. Like, universities used to be a place where open debate was encouraged. Even during the so-called Dark Ages, people like St. Thomas Aquinas back in the 13th century was famous for his enthusiasm for what were called disputations, which were like these open forums of debate where students and academics gathered to discuss open questions that nobody knew the answer to and to allow for different conclusions about them. But today's universities are well documented for enforcing one particular dogmatic approach to questions of morality, truth, and politics. And Charlie Kirk was someone who was trying to push back against that, which everyone should admit is undeniably noble. And from all appearances, it seems like he was a little too successful at that. Those who want to prevent open dialogue and open exploration of truth, they sought to silence him. And you don't have to look very far on social media to find people celebrating the fact that he was killed for it. And now I think many people are asking questions, trying to make sense of this moment of history that we're living through. Like, why did this happen and where do we go from here? And honestly, the answer to why it happened seems fairly easy to me. It's because we live in the modern age, and the modern age is about progress. And progress is about change at all costs, with no tolerance for delay or sectors of society who might be dragging their feet. We want utopia now. We want climate justice now. We want trans rights now, or whatever the issue is. There's no willingness to allow it to manifest in a voluntary or a collaborative way. And out of that impatience comes a willingness among some to use violence if necessary as a justification for making the world a better place. And I've spoken in the past about how virtue works, right? Like virtues like diligence or a good work ethic, those come from practicing good work and suppressing desires for lethargy or laziness. It comes through the habitual combination of choices to honor the duty of the moment every day and to reject idleness and distraction as the alternative. And if you persevere in the habit of doing so, you will one day discover that it's become like a second nature to you. You just are diligent when needed. Fitness is admittedly a more measurable example of this. If you want to get fit, you can't just choose to be fit tomorrow. It takes time, it takes discipline, it requires thousands of small decisions to work out for half an hour a day habitually, and eventually the habit will become the virtue of fitness. And virtues can't be achieved suddenly, and they can't be forced on anyone. They have to be the voluntary consequences of many iterative decisions that accumulate into a habit and which eventually strengthens into good character. And the same is true for society. Progressives take it for granted that what they want to achieve is better than what we currently have. Otherwise, they wouldn't call it progress. They want to make the world a better place, right? But their method has always been a soft or hard revolutionary approach. It's always been about either immediate reform, and if that doesn't work, protest and resistance, and if that doesn't work, well, violence. And this lack of understanding that you can't, in principle, create immediate moral improvement is what the left has always failed to understand, and what makes its approach ultimately evil in its intent. It seeks to force progress or movement towards some perceived improvement by force and with immediacy. But improvement never works that way. We never observe that occurring in cases where improvement has actually taken place. It always requires patience and iterative stages of movement. It also can't be done by force. You can't hold a gun to someone's head and tell them, you need to be more wise starting now, or like more physically fit right now. Again, it has to be voluntary for it to be actually good, and it needs to be developed over time for it to be the real thing. And in moments like this, where something horrific has happened that causes us to re-examine this whole long march of progress, I think we also tend to re-examine our own assumptions. We take for granted that we know what a right-wing person or a left-wing person is, but what is a conservative really? What is a liberal or a progressive really? Because the standard definitions often seem shallow and easy to debunk. I would say that the defining feature of the left is that it seeks change. The defining feature of the right is that it seeks stability. This is how you bridge the gap between something like the revolutionaries of the French Revolution, who were advancing the idea of classical liberalism, and the revolutionaries of the Russian Revolution, who were advancing socialism. Those two philosophies are not compatible, but those were both left-wing progressive movements seeking change at all costs. And this consistency that the left wants change and the right wants stability, this has been true from throughout history, as long as Western civilization has been in conflict with itself, which started with the modern age. Christendom, which precedes the modern age in the West, had, yes, granted internal conflict, but it was always conflict over material ends and political power. But in the modern age, it became ideological, and it was always instigated by a revolutionary element. The Protestants wanted to overthrow the Catholic order, and they were prepared to use violence and warfare to do so. Yes, the Catholics were prepared to use war to restore that old stability of Christendom and to prevent further instability, but they certainly weren't the instigators of that revolution. The English Civil War was about overthrowing a traditionalist king in Charles I for a more democratic or parliamentarian model. Charles, of course, lost the war and his life after being executed by people willing to use any means necessary. The French Revolution, which I already mentioned, was about overthrowing the old political order for a new, innovative one, with violence being the means to do so. The Russian Revolution was the same. The Italian Revolution, the same. The Mexican Revolution, the same. The countless instances of revolution and political violence that erupted in the 19th century were all the same pattern. This was about people who wanted change and were willing to use any means necessary. And contrary to popular belief, National Socialism in Germany was a progressive revolutionary movement. Kaiser Wilhelm, the former emperor, thought that they were a kind of like neoconservative movement that would restore him to power, because if you're going backwards, if you're reactionary, that's obviously where you go. He was the immediate regime that preceded them, but he was sorely mistaken. They wanted nothing to do with that older order. They were a new and revolutionary regime. Once Hitler started to make deals and to consolidate his power, Ernst Röhm, who was an early collaborator and friend, started to express reservation because he understood the National Socialist movement to be fundamentally revolutionary in character and couldn't understand how it could begin to work towards a stable political order with Hitler as its leader. Hitler had him murdered because he had already achieved his revolutionary regime. And what's interesting is that these violent, revolutionary, and progressive movements were almost never movements of the people. The populace has always had peace and stability as their chief goal. The people are always conservative in instinct. If you look at these major disruptions in history, they just want the opportunity to live in peace and to pursue a simple life. It's the ambitious revolutionaries who sought after power that were always stirring the pot. It wasn't common religious people who were asking for the Protestant Revolution. It was clerics like Luther and his powerful political allies that set Europe on fire. Common people didn't want the English Reformation or the English Civil War or the French-Russian revolutions, nor did they want the political regimes that came after them. So how do conservatives succeed? If the aims of the right are stability, if you always have an element in your society that is willing to burn down neighborhoods, throw bombs, and shoot the opposition, then stability is an actual impossibility. Charlie Kirk was a powerful voice who wanted stability, who wanted actual reform, and he was so successful at spreading his message that people on the left use their last resort, which they're always willing to use to achieve their ends. The only way that the right can defeat a political left that is always willing to use violence is by resorting to its method and thereby becoming the thing that they are resisting. Seems to me that there is no political solution, which is why the spiritual dimension of Charlie's message, I believe, was his most powerful. He would often say that more important than politics, more important than debate, more important than fixing the system was faith in Christ. And he was absolutely right about that. As Kennedy Hall tweeted out in the aftermath of the news of his death, there is no political solution without Christ. Only chaos. The left seeks perpetual change through violence if necessary, and that can only mean chaos. No peace, no stability, nothing to build your life on, just constant flux and chaos. But there is one place where violent revolutionaries cannot take away our peace, and that's in the inner life with Christ, in the life of the world to come. Now, that doesn't mean we don't strive for justice, we don't work for peace and stability, but Christ told us not to fear those who can kill our bodies. It's our souls we should seek to protect, and if we're faithful to his message, there's nothing anyone can do to take our souls away from us. That has to be voluntary. We're the ones who control that. But if we make revenge our goal, if we make establishing a pure political order at all costs our goal, then we will likely lose our souls in the process. Jesus did not come here to establish a peaceful political order. He came to liberate us from the false hopes of this life, which only disappoint, in order to give us an ultimate hope in the next life. And Charlie seemed to get that, and that's what I think he should be most remembered for. And I bet if we could ask him what his message would be for us in the aftermath of his murder, I bet it would be to seek first the kingdom of God. If we want peace and stability, it will only ever come through spiritual holiness. The old stability of Christendom did not come through revolution. It came through the blood of the martyrs. My hope, my prayer, is that Charlie Kirk's blood will plant a similar seed for a hope that is worth having. Okay, thanks for watching that. I hope that was a blessing to you, that it encouraged you and edified you in your journey with the Lord. And if it did, and if you want to support the work that we're doing as a result, which thank you so much for considering that, because we really do need your help to make this viable. Then there's a few ways you can do that. You can go to brianholdsworth.ca/help, which is obviously my website. And there's some options there. One is to just contribute through my website. The other would be to join us over on Locals, where you can interact with me and other like-minded people. You can gain access to exclusive content, where we're doing live streams and I'm uploading videos and things like that. But we're also doing a secret philosophy study with a secret philosopher academic who's joining us once a month to take us through difficult texts that we want to read on our own, but we need some clarification and some guidance on that. So right now we're working through some works by St. Thomas Aquinas with him, and he's a Thomistic philosopher. So if that's interesting to you, join me on brianholdsworth.locals.com. And again, you can check out my website at brianholdsworth.ca/help.